At first, you tried to bring everyone with you. You changed your habits, you shifted your focus, but you still looked over your shoulder, checking if they were clapping, if they understood, if they still approved. That was the last piece of weakness holding you back. Because the truth is, the second you start changing, they stop recognizing you. Not because you've become something worse, but because you've become something unfamiliar. And people don't like what they can't define. They don't like when you stop being predictable. They don't like when you stop apologizing for choosing a different path. You were never supposed to stay where you started, but some of them built a version of you in their minds, and they don't want it to change. They liked you when you were available, when you said yes, when you played small, when your words didn't make them uncomfortable. But that version of you was never real. It was survival. It was the you that kept the peace, avoided conflict, stayed quiet. And now, you're not here to be understood. You're not here to make them comfortable. You're here to evolve. There's a cost to that. Not in money, not in pain. In perception, people will think you're distant, cold, arrogant, because to them, silence feels like judgment. Discipline feels like rejection. Focus feels like betrayal, but that's only because your presence used to validate their excuses. Your softness made them feel safe. Your chaos kept theirs hidden. Your distractions made their own feel normal. And now you've ruined that. You've walked out of the cage. And the ones still locked inside, they don't like how free you look. But remember this. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself they first met. You are allowed to evolve past the expectations they placed on your shoulders. You are allowed to outgrow dynamics that were built on your silence. And when you do, when you rise quietly, when you choose stillness over noise, solitude over validation, you will be called selfish, fake, too intense, too much, or maybe not enough. That's the point. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. And realness has a weight to it. It exposes everything that isn't solid. It pushes away people who are only attached to your past, not invested in your becoming. They don't miss you. They miss how they felt when you didn't know your worth, when you were more accessible, more convenient, more manageable. But when you stop shrinking yourself, you become unpredictable. And when you stop people-pleasing, you become threatening. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've stopped doing what made them feel superior. You're no longer their therapist, no longer their cushion, no longer the backup plan. You've become something they can't use anymore. And that's when the labels start. They'll say, you changed. Of course you did. Growth is change. Healing is change. Discipline is change. And every step you take away from the version of you they liked, that's a step toward the version of you that you were meant to become. But there's a moment, a bitter, quiet moment, where you look around and realize that being unlikable isn't a side effect. It's a stage. It's the point where you have to choose. Approval or evolution. Comfort or confrontation. Pleasing them or keeping your soul intact. And that choice doesn't just happen once. It happens every day. Every time you say no. Every time you leave the group chat on red. Every time you choose the gym instead of drinks, the early morning instead of the easy night, the truth instead of pretending. People don't get angry because you changed. They get angry because they didn't. And deep down, they know they could have. They just didn't want it enough. Not like you do. So let them be confused. Let them talk. Let them twist your story into something they can digest. That's not your concern anymore, because your concern is growth. Your concern is clarity. Your concern is protecting the quiet, focused, unstoppable version of you that doesn't need applause to keep moving. Becoming unlikable isn't the curse, it's the checkpoint. It means you're doing it right. You don't owe them a speech. You don't owe them a disclaimer before you evolve. But for most of your life, you gave one anyway. Every time you started to grow, you explained it. You softened it. You tried to make it easier for people to accept the fact that you were changing. But here's what no one tells you. They never really hated your growth. They hated your courage. Because when you change in front of people who are staying the same, you force them to confront their own comfort. You become a mirror. And they hate what it shows them. It's not about what you're doing. It's about what you're no longer willing to tolerate. The low standards, the fake laughs, the unspoken tension, the way you used to shrink your thoughts so they could feel bigger. You're not playing that game anymore. You're not shaping your truth to keep their version of reality intact. And when that happens, when you stop bending, you become hard to recognize. To them, that's betrayal. But to you, that's rebirth. You've always been taught to keep the peace. Smile, nod, stay neutral. But growth doesn't happen in neutral. It happens when you shift into drive and leave behind anything that slows you down, even if it had a familiar face. You used to crave their understanding. Now you crave alignment. You used to measure yourself by how comfortable you made others feel. Now you measure your life by how honest you're willing to be. They'll say you're acting different. They're right, because different is what happens when you stop being who they needed you to be and start becoming who you needed all along. The path you're on now doesn't require an audience. It requires accuracy. It doesn't need constant support. It needs daily commitment. And not everyone can walk with you in that. They weren't meant to. You'll see it in the subtle shifts first. They stop checking in. They joke that you're too busy. They downplay your progress. They act confused by your choices. But the silence you hear from them? That's the sound of your healing no longer making them feel important. People liked you better when you were insecure, because insecurity is easy to manipulate. You apologized for being tired. You explained why you needed boundaries. You gave reasons for saying no, as if protecting your peace required permission. But you've evolved. You no longer over-explain. You no longer chase closeness where clarity is missing. You no longer stay just to prove you're loyal. Because you've learned the difference between being liked and being respected. Liked people are convenient. Respected people are consistent. And respect often begins the moment you choose silence over validation. It's not that you've become rude. It's that you've become rooted. And when you're rooted, you don't flinch when someone doesn't like your boundaries. You don't collapse when someone pulls back. You don't crumble when someone decides they're done with you. Because you didn't build this version of you for them. You built it for every past version of you who felt ignored, dismissed, tolerated, used. You built it for the moments you swallowed your voice just to keep things smooth. You built it for the nights you overthought every word, wondering if you were too much or not enough. You built it to survive, and now you're building to thrive. But thriving isn't pretty. It's not always uplifting. It doesn't come with applause or group chats cheering you on. Thriving is messy. It's quiet. It's often misunderstood because it happens away from the crowd, behind closed doors, beneath long nights, inside the tension of choosing long-term gain over short-term comfort. That's why becoming unlikable is part of it, because when you stop justifying your growth, people lose access to the version of you that needed their approval, and some of them only loved you when you needed them. They'll question your silence. They'll feel entitled to your time. They'll act like you owe them the old you. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone a previous version of yourself just because they're more comfortable with your past than your progress. The moment you let go of needing to be liked is the moment you become free. Free to say no without guilt. Free to take space without apology. Free to move forward without dragging every relationship behind you like a weight. You're not losing compassion. You're gaining perspective. You're not colder, just more careful with your energy. It's not distance. It's direction. And it's not about being better than anyone. It's about being better for yourself. Keep going, because the further you walk, the quieter it gets. And in that quiet, you find your center. Not the noise of praise, not the chaos of groupthink, just you, fully seen by yourself, and fully okay with being misunderstood by the rest. You never meant to outgrow them. You just stopped pausing your progress to make everyone else feel comfortable. And when you did, the distance started growing by itself. Not because you pulled away, but because you stopped hiding the fact that you were building something bigger than comfort. There's a quiet pain that comes with evolution. It's not the grind, not the isolation. It's the realization that some of the people you love the most will never understand who you had to become. You wanted to stay connected. You tried to explain it gently. You told them it was about discipline, about healing, about vision. But no matter how carefully you said it, they only heard one thing. You're leaving. But you weren't. You were just stepping into the version of yourself that can't afford to stay stuck. The version that's tired of pretending. The one that's not willing to spend another year playing a role in someone else's comfort zone. That's when it clicks. You were never part of their plan. You were part of their pattern. A role, a label, a placeholder in a cycle they didn't want to break. And when you stopped fitting that role, when you stopped playing along, they didn't just resist you, they resented you. Because change exposes what's stagnant. And the moment you start changing, they have two choices: rise with you or pull you back down. Most choose the second. Not because they're evil, not because they hate you, but because they don't want to question everything they've built on avoidance, and your progress forces them to. They'll tell you you've changed. But the truth is, they never really knew you. They only knew the version of you who kept your light dim, the one who overcompensated, who laughed when things weren't funny, who said yes to things that left you empty. That version of you wasn't real. It was survival. And you finally walked away from it. So now you feel the distance. You feel the cold shoulders, the silence after the winds. The eye rolls behind the proud of you messages. You see through it all. It hurts, but it's honest. And that honesty is a threshold. You're stepping into a life that doesn't revolve around being liked. It revolves around being whole, unfiltered, focused, present in your own skin without the pressure to shrink. This is the part they don't prepare you for. Not the grind, not the early mornings, the emotional shedding, the part where you realize you can't keep everything. That growth has a cost, and sometimes that cost is people. But here's the paradox. The more you try to hold on to what's not aligned, the more it rots inside your hands. The more you delay letting go, the heavier it gets. You carry conversations that feel fake. You sit in rooms that feel wrong. You keep showing up to dynamics that chip away at your clarity, until eventually you drop it all, not out of anger, out of necessity. You're not bitter. You're just done bleeding for bonds that never gave you life. You're done watering connections that never grew roots. You're done proving your value to people who only noticed your absence when you stopped serving them. Becoming unlikable isn't rebellion, it's refinement. It's the natural side effect of getting serious about your direction, because clarity looks like arrogance to people still hiding in confusion. When you move with intention, you offend those who wander. When you prioritize discipline, you challenge those still sedated by distraction. And when you finally choose yourself, fully, unapologetically, you become a mirror that many would rather shatter than look into. But that's not your job anymore. You're not a reflection for others to feel safe around. You're not an emotional crutch. You're not a character in anyone else's narrative. You're the author now. And not every character makes it to the final chapters. That's not cruelty. It's structure. Because a life without boundaries has no shape. And a man without edges gets cut by everyone around him. So let the misunderstandings stand. Let the rumors spread. Let the distance grow. Let them think whatever helps them sleep. Meanwhile, you build. Quietly, precisely, with your values intact and your peace protected. Because while they gossip, you're growing. While they post, you're practicing. While they judge, you're moving. And while they cling to the past, you're shaping a future that doesn't need their permission to exist. No, not everyone will like this version of you. But this version doesn't need to be liked. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be focused. It just needs to be free. The truth is, becoming unlikable isn't the end of connection. It's the beginning of alignment. It's the moment when the noise fades and the signal sharpens. It's where you finally hear your own voice, clearer, stronger, steady. That's the voice that builds empires. That's the voice that doesn't flinch. That's the voice that doesn't fold when approval disappears. And that voice? That's you. The real you. The one that never needed permission to evolve. Let them go. You're not abandoning them. You're just answering the version of yourself who waited years for you to finally show up. And now you have.